We're going to allow a few people to come in and then I will get started. All righty, well, welcome to tonight's event from the University Bookstore in Seattle. This is Sandhya Menon in conversation with Mackenzi Lee. And the University Bookstore has been around 122 years now. And pre-COVID, we were doing about 400 events a year. We've cut that back a good bit, but come September, I think we're going to start having more events. So the book that we're celebrating the release of now is called Of Princes and Promises by Sandhya Menon. She is the New York Times bestselling author of When Dimple Met Rishi, From Twinkle with Love, and There's Something About Sweetie. A full-time dog servant and part-time writer, she makes her home in the foggy mountains of Colorado. Her newest novel is Of Princes and Promises. And tonight she is in conversation with Mackenzi Lee. Mackenzi holds a BA in history and an MFA from Simmons College in writing for children and young adults. She's a New York Times bestselling and award-winning author of the young adult historical fantasy novels, This Monstrous Thing, The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue, and The Lady's Guide to Petticoats and Piracy. She is also the author of Bygone Badass Broads, a collection of short biographies of women in history you probably don't know about but should, based on her viral Twitter series of the same name, and The History of the World in 50 Dogs, which is the same, but with dogs. She's currently working on a series for Marvel about the early lives of favorite MCU, Marvel Comics anti-heroes, which kicked off with Loki, Where Mischief Lies. The second book in the series, Gamora and Nebula, Sisters in Arms, came out in June, and came out last week. In 2020, she was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list for her work in bringing minority narratives to historical fiction and nonfiction. She loves Diet Coke, sweater weather, and Star Wars. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass this on over to Sandhya and Mackenzi.
Thank you.
Woof, my bio is too long. I gotta chop that thing down. Good
It's
grief.
all good. But I think we all have like the long bio and then the short bio.
Yeah. It also feels especially long when you're like staring at someone on a computer screen reading it while watching yourself stare at them. So I'm sort of like, it's been Zoom events have been a lot of like, what do I do with my face while other people are like introducing me or talking about me or
yes.
Whoa, it's very
so relate.
so fun. So weird.
Yes.
Have you done many virtual events? Not for this one, but just like in general.
Yes, so many. And it's like, it's funny because at the beginning I was like, I have to get fully dressed and like be on, and now it's like sweatpants on the bottom. Yay, not doing my hair, just throwing some product in it. Like, it's just so much more casual now, and I really enjoy it. I think that at least some of the rumors I'm hearing are some places want to continue doing virtual events because they're just so much more accessible, and then have like a mix of virtual and in person.
Yeah, it's cool to be. I hesitate to say that anything about the pandemic has been like good or cool, but it has been neat to get to do. So I haven't done any virtual events for the whole pandemic, and then until I was already it worked out really well because I was already going to take a hiatus from just like events and things until my next book came out, and then everyone was forced to take a hiatus from everything. So I wished it a little too hard, speaking of curses and promises and things. But so I haven't done any virtual events really until this past week for release. And it's cool when like people will be listening in from, like I had someone from Argentina who I'd met when I was in Argentina a couple of years ago for book events at one of them. And I was like, this is so, like we would never be able to do this. And so it's cool to get to, and I had like an event with a bookstore in Sweden and they were the loveliest humans. And I was like, Sweden? Never would have thought it.
That's amazing. So I love that.
Yeah, it's cool to get to do that kind of stuff. But then also I miss not having to watch my face react while my bio is being
You know, I feel that awkward even when I'm on stage at like a festival and they're reading the bio.
Oh,
I'm like,
absolutely.
how do I sit?
But at least you don't have to watch yourself do it.
Yeah, that's true. You can stare at the audience.
Right.
Make them uncomfortable.
Wait, I have to tell you one quick funny story about this week of events. So I did my first thing I did was a live thing on Marvel's Instagram, which has like 38 million followers or something. And so I've never done a live on a channel that big. And it's like, first of all, you start and there's like immediately a million people on because you can see the little number. And then they realize who you are and they're like, oh, it's not Tom Hiddleston or whoever. And then it just shrinks down to like 5 people. And then half of them, all they're doing in the comments is leaving comments that are saying things like, when are you going to show us a Loki teaser? When are you going to show us when are we going to hear about the new Hulk show? Like everybody, all it is they want something other than what you're giving them. So I was not reading the comments, obviously. The one time I looked down at the comments, of things just flashed by that says, who is this? And I was like, good question. But my mother, who doesn't Instagram, who doesn't do Marvel, she has no context for any of this, but she just like wants to be involved so bad. She was watching the live stream because she's adorable and like got an Instagram account just so she could watch it. And I like taught her how to watch it. And then she came over that night for cake at my place because we were having release day celebration shenanigans. And I had told a story during the live stream about her and about how we had watched Ragnarok together and she had thought I was making up the word Mjolnir when I said that was Thor's hammer's name. And she thought I was like trying to haze her or like trick her into saying this weird thing. Anyways, it's a long story. But so we were talking about, I told that story and then she was thrilled that she was like, you mentioned me in your Marvel live chat. And then everybody wanted to know more about me. Like, what? Like, she was like, I was reading in the comments and they all said they wanted more from Mom and they wanted more of a sneak preview of Mom. And I was like, what are you talking about? And turns out they didn't want a sneak preview of Mom. They wanted a sneak preview of the next Doctor Strange movie, which is called the Multiverse of Mayhem, which acronyms to Mom. So all these people were like clamoring for Doctor Strange and my mom's like, they love me. And then of course, immediately after when she like had this like moment of embarrassment and she has this like weird cackly giggle she does. And then of course, an hour later, she has to like tell us all, she's like, just, I knew they weren't talking about me. Okay.
This is horrible. I love that so much. She sounds amazing.
She's funny. She's hysterical. She makes me laugh and has put in such a lovely, valiant effort to love these books and read them, even though she has no context and has no idea who any of these people were. Her brain about broke when she found out. So Loki, one of the characters in Loki is named Amora, and she's a Marvel Comics character. And my mom had worked so hard to be like, Loki, Amora. And then she's like, who's your next one about? And I said, Gamora and Nebula. And she's like, so it's the same character from the first one. It's like, oh no, they just rhyme. It might break your brain.
Oh no. At least she's trying. I think that's incredible.
She does.
So sweet.
She does. She's as supportive as a human can be. It's very cute.
That's amazing.
Are your children impressed by your best-selling author status or not so much?
No, so my daughter is now at the age where she wants to read everything I write, which is super cute, but I have to be like, okay, some books you can read and some you have to wait. And I think they're more impressed that I know certain people. Like I was telling you earlier that she had stolen Gamora and Nebula for me. And she's very impressed that I know you. They're very impressed that I know Roshni. And
the biggest mistake I ever made. The biggest mistake I ever made was mentioning to a room full of 7th graders that I once met Rick Riordan because all they wanted to do was talk about Rick Riordan. It's like, we just sat at a table.
Exactly.
We shared an elevator.
So you know the pain. Yes, this is how my children are. They are impressed because I know other writers they enjoy. But I'll take it. I'll take any amount of impressing them is cool now because they're 12 and 13.
So you'll never impress them again.
Never again. Never. I'm barely hanging on as it is. But yeah, so tell me, like we were talking a little bit, how has release week, it's been weird releasing. I've released 2 books during the pandemic. I'm trying to think. Or 3 books during the pandemic, actually. Jeez, it's ridiculous.
Overachiever.
It's crazy.
Fine.
Like, I can't believe it's been going on that long. If you count this as a pandemic still, which I do, then it's 3 books. Otherwise, it's 2. But it's been a weird, surreal experience, like not going to bookstores and not like meeting readers. How have you felt?
I mean, so I had the year before the pandemic, part of the reason I wanted to take time off was because I had kind of burned myself out a little bit because I was traveling so much and doing so many things, which was amazing. And I do not regret one single minute of it. But I also think there was a little, so my first book, most people don't know exists because it was like wildly unread and wildly undermarketed by the publisher. And so nobody knew it existed. And with Gentleman's Guide, so much of the sort of like marketing and groundwork and publicity for that was initiated by me, and just like me, like literally out of Kinko's printing out copies of the manuscript and then throw it at people's faces at book selling. Like I did a lot of it myself. And so I've been so used to for so long, like you have to say yes to everything. And I think we feel that way as women in particular too. Like you have to always say, you have to always be grateful to be there. You can't like put up a fuss. You have to always just be like thankful to have a seat at the table, and thankful to get invited and thankful to get asked. And so I was so used to just like, I have to say yes to everything that comes my way that I stretched myself so thin. And I had 2.5 months out of the year 2019 that I was traveling straight. And I went to I was in 4 cities in 30 days, or not 4 cities, four countries. That sounds more impressive. It was incredible. And I loved getting to travel and going places, but it was too much. And so it's nice to have just had a year kind of at home to hang out with myself and with my dog. So now she's developed separation anxiety. She used to be like, I would go to Australia for 3 weeks and she'd be like, oh, Julie, did you go somewhere? And now I take the trash out and I come back and she's pacing in front of the door. Like, you thought you were dead.
Yes. So, I think the biggest transition and adjustment back to normal life will be for our pets.
Poor dogs.
I know, it's gonna be so sad.
What has your virtual experience been like for all of your books?
It's been good. I can't complain. I definitely feel like there's an energy that comes from being in the room with readers. And I did not get to do that, especially I felt really sad about the third Dimpleverse book, 10 Things I Hate About Pinky came out. And I was closing out the universe, and I didn't really get to see the readers and the fans of that universe in person. I didn't get to do any of that stuff. So that was kind of sad. And then the Dimple TV show came out. I didn't really get to do any in-person stuff for that. So there were a lot of milestones that I felt were just gone by the wayside. My first adult romance came out and I couldn't travel for that. There were big plans for that. So it was it felt really anticlimactic in many ways. But we were talking about earlier, I also feel really great that it's been so accessible for people who couldn't afford to travel before, or for whatever reason, couldn't be at events, and they have been very, very happy with virtual, being able to watch it just virtually. So that's been really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I had something smart to say about that. Oh, the energy. Yeah, I do miss the energy. I miss not having a lag in conversations when you talk to somebody via a computer, or having to mess with headphones.
Yes.
And also, okay, the one thing I don't miss is the cold nightmare panic of no one coming to your events. Because at least on Zoom, if nobody's at your events, you don't know. I don't know how many people are here. Don't want to know. For all I know, I'm just talking to my friend and it's great. Whereas I will just sweat for days over nobody coming to my events, and have done events. Every author I think has done, unless you're exceptionally lucky, everyone's done an event that was attended by nobody.
Yes. Oh my gosh. It's a rite of passage, right? You always feel that it doesn't happen to anyone else, but I always appreciate, I remember you had posted a picture of an event that you went to. It was a festival panel that you were on, and the audience there were only a few, which you said has happened to everybody. But it was so nice to see that because you had so much success at that point with Gentleman's Guide. And I was like, if Mackenzi Lee can go to an event and have this, this kind of attendance, then I shouldn't feel bad at all. So that was really cool and refreshing to see that because it's a right. If you're a mid-list author, unless you're a celebrity author, I think everybody has gone through that.
I know. Well, even like I just read John Green's new book, The Anthropocene Reviewed, and he talks about it in his book, doing an event with that was like really early on in his Looking for Alaska days, that was attended by, it was like his high school friend and like his wife or something, like just two people. And he still decided, there's a whole story. No, I can't remember it. It's a great book though. Everyone should read the book because it's lovely. But I was like, even if John Green's had to suffer through this, we can handle it.
Exactly. The indignities of being a mid-list author.
Oh God, indignity. That is unfortunately one of the first words that comes to mind. Let's talk about the books though. Tell me about your series, or I know about your series, but pretend like I don't know about your series. Tell me about it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, I guess we should both do that. So we're here to talk about A Princess and Promises for me, which is the second book in the Rosettas Academy series. The first one was Of Curses and Kisses, which has a very pretty new cover for the paperback that matches this one. But each book in the series is kind of like a companion novel, so they can stand alone or you can read them in order. And they're all fairy tale retellings set at this elite boarding school. So Of Princes and Promises is a Frog Prince retelling. And it is kind of a gender bent makeover story. So we have our Italian heiress. Her name is Caterina. We met her in book 1. And she is basically looking to take someone new to a gala because she's been dumped in a really horrible, undignified fashion in book 1. And she wants to make sure everybody knows she's back and is better than ever. And so she decides she's really tired of the usual kinds of boys she dates. So she decides to take Rahul, who is the school nerd, extremely awkward, chess nerd, socially anxious guy, who has been secretly in love with her forever. She doesn't know that, but she decides to make him over and take him to the gala. And in the course of, doing that, they buy like new clothes for him and all of this stuff. And they get a supposedly magic pot of hair gel from the guy who sells them all the other stuff. And they don't really believe that there's anything magic going on with the hair gel, but when Rahul puts it on, he does undergo a transformation. And I guess so this series is very much, is it magic or isn't it? You can go either way depending on your proclivities. So there are explanations that might work for why he goes on through such a thorough transformation, or it could be magic. And basically the book is about, is a transformation story always good? Is it always completely a happy thing to change who you are? Or maybe there are parts of you that are allowed to shine and that can be good. So there's a lot of layered stuff. And then with this series, I just wanted to write kind of mysterious, intriguey stuff. So there's a whole other layer to the story about a mystery that unfolds and twists and turns that hopefully readers don't see coming, but it was super fun to write. So now tell me about yours. Tell me about Gamora, Nebula, and the Marvel series and everything else, please.
Oh, look, I don't have a giant background cover. I have my little, I just awkwardly reached behind me to grab that one and then realized I literally have one sitting right next to me on the computer. Whoops. I feel like, I don't know if you get, as an author, you get so many copies of your own book sent to you. Every time they have a new edition, you get 25 of them. I feel like I should build a house out of all of my author copies. I literally have author copies being used to hold up a shelf right now in my closet. Anyways, as you were talking about, I realized that this is a perfect pairing of books. They might look different on the outside, but inside, they're both second book in a series that are unrelated to the first one. Which, as you were saying that, I was interesting. Didn't even put that parallel together before. So yeah, this is the second book in a series unrelated to the first one. The first one is called Loki, Where Mischief Lies. It's a great chaser for the Loki TV show that's coming out right now, so buy that in bulk. And then this one is about, every time I start to describe it, I just want to be like, it's about Gamora and Nebula and their sisters, and they have arms, 3 arms between them. Yeah, so it's about Nebula and Gamora, who we know from Guardians of the Galaxy, a little bit earlier in their timeline than we've seen them in their most popular incarnations there. So they're in the movies, you sort of see them where they've recognized they have this like childhood trauma and abuse and gaslighting that has really like formed a foundation of who they are to themselves and who they are to each other. And you see them trying to sort of break away from Thanos and their relationship with him. So the book is set backward in time, earlier in their timeline, where they have not sort of yet recognized, they're just kind of starting to come out from under his wing and be independent warriors and independent women, and starting to realize that they may have been pitted against each other their whole lives to keep them from teaming up, because if they did, they'd be stronger than everyone. And so the book is about Gamora has arrived on this planet called Torndune, which is a sort of Old West inspired planet that has been strip mined into basically nothing for the renewable energy that lives in the planet. And all the people have like been forced into these indentured servitudes they can't get out of. And it's just like a really terrible, crummy place. And so she's come to this planet under instructions from an unknown benefactor with the assignment to retrieve the heart of the planet. So she ends up falling in with a group of rebels who are trying to advocate for better working conditions, that they're doing it with explosives, and who are also trying to save their planet before it's sort of damaged beyond repair. And so she falls in with them, and then Nebula arrives hot on her tail as usual, determined to do the thing before Gamora can do the thing, so that she can then go back to Thanos and be like, look, I did the thing better. I should be better than your 3rd round draft pick. And inevitably they end up crossing paths, and they start to realize that there are more things going on. So yeah, there will be 3 books in this series. How many are you doing in yours?
3 also right now. Yeah, there's one more coming out in 2023.
Really lives.
I know, it's so weird. It's so weird. I was just about to say that. So like, tell me about, like, I've been super curious about your process for writing these books, because it's different from writing something just like out of your brain, right? So like, how is that? Is that harder or easier?
I mean, it's both. Like sometimes it can be, I don't know, when I'm doing original stuff, I get so overwhelmed by all the possibilities of what I could do and what I'm not doing, and how I have this great premise, someone else should write it because they're smarter than me. So that when I actually, like, sometimes I'm just like, can I just like take all of my good ideas and give them to a better writer? Because I just never feel like worthy of my own ideas. Like the ideas I'm like legit really excited about and feel like they could be something, I'm like, I'm not smart enough to write this. Someone call a real author. Yes. Imposter syndrome.
I know.
But yeah, so when I'm like in that space where you're overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, it can be nice to have somebody who's literally like telling you what to do, and there's literally a foundation and the world already exists. And so as much as I was like building up my own sci-fi world within this one, the bigger Marvel universe already exists around it, and there's creators and characters and things that already exist. So it was nice in that way that sometimes I could just kind of be, and like, for example, I went into like the pitch meeting for this book and I said, I want to do a space Western, and I want to do like kind of Firefly and Dune and Mad Max and all of these things. I want to do mining, and I want to do an Old West. And I would really like to talk about religion in the Old West, and how religion was sort of an exploitive force in these like impoverished mining communities and things. And I want to talk about like manifest destiny and how so many people have to be exploited in order for this like myth of the American cowboy to exist. And I promise it's a Marvel book. But when I talked about like religion, one of the Marvel people at the table was like, oh, do you know about the Universal Church of Truth? It sounded like he was trying to recruit me to a cult. I realized because I say it like that. So there already exists within the Marvel universe this like tyrannical, nefarious, megalomaniac church that Gamora has like roots in her earliest comic book incarnations. And there's already this big like sort of established global force of zealots that I could just go like, and I was like, great, don't have to make that stuff up, can just go back and read some of the comics, and they sent me like their Marvel encyclopedia pages. And so like, that's really helpful when you have someone who's like, not only should you do this thing, it literally already exists and people have done a lot of the legwork for you. So that kind of stuff is great. It can be, so with Loki, I think me and Marvel both went in just like the series was what mattered more than the individual book itself. So I kind of got away with writing like a 3-paragraph, the equivalent of like the jacket copy on the back of a book as a pitch. And they were like, great, love it, do that, write that. And then I wrote it, and then they were like, oh, no, but you can't do that, actually. We can't tell you why. And I was like, okay. So I like rewrote it, and then they're like, oh, no, we don't like that either. So I ended up kind of rewriting the book like 4 or 5 times.
No.
Which wasn't great. Yeah, it was a nightmare. Loki was a nightmare writing process, to the point that I the first time I went to read from it, I was reading a section. I was like, I literally don't remember writing this. Like, wrote it in a blackout fuse state the week before it was due. Like but it turned out fine, and it was okay. And I now have like a great, and I also didn't have an editor. God, this is such a nightmare. I could keep going on about this, but I won't. Nobody edited Loki. It's great, it's fine. But with this one, I had like a great editor that they hired. I had actually a great editor and a great executive editor I worked with. And I went into this one being like, I am absolutely not going to write this book 15 times. I am going to be prepared. I'm going to get everything okayed ahead of time. I'm going to have everything in emails so I can, like, when you say I can't do this thing you already said I can do, which did happen, I'm going to have the paper, I'm going to have the paper trail. And I've never been an outliner before. I usually try and write like kind of driving in the dark, where you can only see as far as your headlights, so you have to keep driving in order to see any farther. And that's always kind of worked. Every once in a while I'll fail spectacularly at it, but when it works, it really works. And so with this one, I was like, nope, we're going to go into the plan. And it was so helpful to have a detailed outline. And I hate that outlining works. And I'm furious that I'm like, oh, I'm an outliner. But it was super helpful to have more of a plan. And so I'm doing the 3rd book with them right now, which, oh my God, I've had so much like anxiety about accidentally revealing who the 3rd book is about, because I'm under pain of death, not allowed to, and I'm working on it right now. So it's on my brain. And so it's like, every time I like inch close to it, I can feel myself start sweating. But as we're working on the 3rd one, I was like, we are going in with such a tight outline. There's going to be 15 pages of outline stuff so that we are not deviating from this outline. Oh, my dog just sat up because I got heated. Anyways.
She can sense the energy.
She can, yeah. My power is growing. Anyways, so it's a little different. How do you approach adapting fairy tales? I've adapted like within a universe. I've done kind of my Frankenstein riff is so off the wall though that it's totally different. I've never done like an adaptation of a story before. How do you decide what to take and what to throw away, and what's going to be a direct analog and what you're going to just kind of fudge a little bit? And also, how much do you, this actually, I struggle with this with Marvel. How much do you draw from like original versions of a fairy tale, and how much do you draw from the most popular iterations of the fairy tale?
Right. Yes, that was a huge thing that I had to struggle with. Ultimately, I think just listening to you talk about your experience with Loki, like I started sweating because I was like, oh my God, all my worst nightmares wrapped up in one experience. So the fact that the book is so good and came out so well is like a testament to you and your skill as a writer. But so I think I'm much luckier with the fairy tales because there's no one telling me, oh, you can't do that, or you have to, for reasons unknown, you can't really go there with this fairy tale. So what I did was I did a really loose interpretation of the fairy tale. So like, you can tell that there are elements of Beauty and the Beast and elements of the Frog Prince, but there's nothing that is like, oh yeah, this is like a one-to-one kind of retelling. Just because I wanted to walk in like the contemporary world more than the fantasy world. So like the magic is just like a sprinkling of like, is it magic or is it not? Like you could take it either way. So I definitely wanted it to feel very much like a boarding school story with just like this element of you never quite know what's going on at Rosetta Academy. It feels like anything could happen. So it's very loose. So that's what I did, is I just went into it saying, this is what, even choosing the fairy tale, I actually thought of like the story that I wanted to write first, and then try to figure out, is there a fairy tale that would fit the story pretty well. And then I went with that. And so like for this of Princes and Promises, I wanted to write a gender bent makeover story. I knew I wanted Rahul to be the one made over for the girl, and then for him to go through this whole like process of questioning, is it worth it to kind of discard an old identity that he thought wasn't working for him in order for a newer, more acceptable one. And it just felt like the Frog Prince really fit with that. So yeah, I just really went with the plot and the characters first, and then chose what to keep around the fairy tale, what worked. And sometimes it was just like an overarching theme of like transformation, for instance, that worked, as opposed to any specific thing. And really with the Beauty and the Beast one, I decided to go for more of the like cartoon fairy tale retellings kind of version, just because that's such a beloved fairy tale. And I feel like that's more what people expect from my contemporary romances, is like more of a happy, fluffy kind of feeling than anything, you know, raw and like scary or anything like that. So that's kind of what I did. It was very loosey-goosey, as you can probably tell. Although I did also, like you outlined, I'm a huge outliner and plotter. So when you were saying that it worked for you, I was like, yay. But do you think that you are going to keep outlining even like your own non-Marvel books?
I haven't done a non-Marvel book since I became an outliner, so I couldn't say. Only time will tell, really.
Yes.
I mean, I think I've tried to outline in the past and had bad luck with it. And I've outlined and then immediately realized it wasn't working as soon as I started writing, but couldn't sort of identify it. And like I've sold books off, I sold Ladies' Guide off a synopsis, which was a terrible idea. Because then I kept trying to stick to the synopsis, and then the synopsis like fundamentally didn't work because I didn't know how to write a synopsis, and it ended up changing a ton. But I felt like I was more beholden to the synopsis than I was to like the characters in the world and the book itself for a long time. So I felt kind of trapped by my synopsis for a while. Nobleman's Guide, which is the third gentleman's guidebook, I also sold on an outline that is legitimately unrecognizable from the book. The only thing that's the same is that they're all still named Montague. So it hasn't worked for me in the past, but it worked so well on Gamora Nebula and Anonymous Book 3, or it's been working well so far, knock on wood. So I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah.
I always say I'm not going to sell another book on synopsis because it's so hard to work under that pressure, but then the allure of like getting a paycheck fast always wins me over.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This is exactly the conversation I've been having here with like my husband and my agent and writer friends, because I realized also that selling on synopsis, which is what I've been doing since Dimple sold, was great because you get that paycheck really fast. But I also felt kind of constrained because you know how you sell like 2 years in advance. And by the time I was sitting down to write the book, I felt like creatively I'd like moved on from that idea and I wanted to do something new. And so I just felt, like you said, I felt a little trapped and burned out. And so this year, my plan is to write 2 books before I sell them. So we'll see how that goes. But it is really scary because this is the first time I've done that since like 2016. So I'm terrified.
Yeah, I got really hung up when after my first book came out, because the only reason I got to write a second book was because I had a 2-book contract. So it was like Monstrous Thing, an untitled second book. They were really hoping there was going to be series potential in Steampunk Frankenstein, and there wasn't. And I remember getting so hung up with, because like Gentleman's Guide was not the original second book in that contract. It was supposed to be this other one I was working on about like Chicago steel mills and a little bit of magic, and it was just like really sad, and everybody had cholera and like missing limbs and things. And it just wasn't working. And I think part of the reason it didn't work as a book was just because of my headspace as a writer, which is my whole writing life up to that point, it had been, I am going to write exactly what I want to. I'm going to write from a place of love. And like, I'm going to write about what I'm interested in. And then I'm going to throw it out there and see if it sticks to anything. And then immediately everything about that flips. And suddenly it's like, you have an editor, you have an agent, I had like 5 fans, but still I was like, I have fans, I have a brand I have to think of. And everything is suddenly inverted with no transition period. And it really like messed with my brain for a long time. Plus the whole, I don't know if you experienced this. I feel like this happens to me every time I have a book come out. The anti-climax of releasing a book where you're like, everything is changing. Literally nothing changes. Every release day has felt like the world is I'm going to wake up a different person tomorrow. And then you wake up and I just remember like the day my first book came out, like sitting on the train on my way to work being like, nobody knows that my book has come. I had my first novel out today, and I was like, oh, nobody knows, because like it doesn't actually, and also there's 10,000 other books out today. It's a weird mind space to be in, and it's really not conducive to being creative. So I don't know if you experienced any of that, but.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's exactly what I've been just mulling over, is like, it's so hard to have, because you write because you love writing and you love stories, and you know that's like your passion. But then when you start doing it as a career, which I'm super grateful that I get to do, it also comes with like the business side of things, and inevitably like the numbers, they don't mix with creativity, like the sales and all of the stuff that comes with the deadlines and the word counts and all of that. It just doesn't go with being creative and free-spirited and doing it for the love of story and all of that. So I completely agree. It is really hard to balance the two. And I don't know about you, because I love your Instagram, your social media your presence is amazing. So I don't know if you even feel this, but I kind of feel like social media for me is tied into that also, where when I have to be on social media and like putting out like pretty pictures and thinking about what content I'm creating for that, it definitely also takes away from my creativity for like what I can bring to my novels. And I haven't figured out how to like balance those yet either.
See, I have a little bit of the opposite, because I love doing stuff for Instagram, and I love having a sort of more visual outlets, whether it's Instagram, whether it's like painting, or I'm not particularly good at these things, but like I've been a pianist my whole life, and I've gotten really back into playing the piano this year during quarantine. And like, it's nice to have something you can step away, but still do something creative. So for me, Instagram is like fun. The thing that stresses me out about social media is every time I see any other author post anything about anything from like, I wrote 2,000 words today, to things like, I've been doing TV production stuff for my show based on my hit novel all week, and I've been on the bestseller list for 18 years, and it's very, like, anytime I see anything relating, like any span of that, I feel bad about myself. And it sucks. And it sucks to feel like there's this well that like, if someone else drinks it first, and like we're all drinking from the same well, and eventually it's going to go dry, and there's not going to be room for me to have a successful writing day, or for me to have like exciting news coming, or like that. It's just like the comparison aspect of it is killer, to the point that there's a bunch of authors I follow who I really like, but I don't personally know them. And often for some reason, it's that like slight removal makes other people's good news feel like your bad news for me. And so I've like muted a ton of people on Instagram, and I just want to be like, I really like you and you seem lovely and I love your books. I just can't watch good things happen to you because I'm a monster and I'm a broken human being.
Oh my God, no. Oh my gosh, no, that is so relatable. Like, I think that's like the number one thing that people always say about social media is it kills creativity because of the comparison. Like, you can't, you don't see like all the crap that's happened to them and the events that they've done at like in huge auditoriums where 2 people showed up. Like, you don't see any of that. So you get this really skewed perception of like all the stuff that's, they've got everything just handled, and everything's always so glittery and great for them. And like, that is really hard. That's something I actively work on. that I've gotten pretty good at not letting that insecurity kind of bubble up in me anymore. But it is something that I do have to actively work on and tell myself what I just said, like constantly, because it is hard. And then I think the other thing that helps me a lot is I just tell myself, like, I'm just in it to write books. Like, all of this other stuff that happens is gravy. So, like, really, as long as someone gives me a contract, like, that's all I am looking for, is to write books and release them into the world. So that's helped me a lot. But yeah, I agree. It is really, really hard. And yeah, I completely agree with you, by the way, about a creative outlet. I do like a lot of art, like painting and drawing and stuff. And I think that's like essential. I wish that Instagram would felt like a creative outlet for me, because you can tell that yours does, because it's a masterpiece. It's amazing. I just can't get there with social media. I don't know what it is.
Well, my fun on Instagram is that I really like fashion, and it's something that I will never do professionally. I'm not a model. I'm not a stylist. I'm not a fancy enough person to really own and buy fancy clothes or like be sent them for free to wear to my movie premieres. And especially I think during this past year, I have both like forgotten how to wear clothes that don't have elasticine in them, which is fine. Like, wear your I love sweatpants. They're fantastic. But I have all these like fun clothes that I really want to wear and that I bought because I love, and I bought all these like aspirational things during the pandemic. Like, I bought like 3 suits during the pandemic. Never owned a suit before. Wow. I have nowhere to wear a suit. Like, somebody please invite me to some kind of suit wearing occasion. It's like my at first I was just like, I'm gonna buy a blouse in hopes that someday I'll go to the grocery store again. And now I'm like, I'm gonna buy a floor-length sequin gown in hopes that someday I go to the Oscars.
Amazing.
So I also just have all these like weird clothes that I love, that I want to like wear and show off and make art with. And also, one of the weird things about the pandemic, and I hadn't kind of realized this until the incredibly brilliant, one of my favorite authors, Noelle Stevenson, I listened to an interview with her on Cameron Esposito's podcast, and she was talking about how she had gotten top surgery during quarantine, and how she started taking like low doses of testosterone. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. I think her pronouns are still she, though, because I remember they talked about that in the podcast together. But she was saying how quarantine for her had been a year of evaluating her self-image and how she looked and how she wanted to look and how she felt about herself without any kind of outside influences on that. Like, she wasn't thinking about, what do I have to wear to be taken seriously by this writer's room that I'm going into? What do I have to wear so that I'm not too threatening to these men that I'm going to be pitching on this? And I thought that was so fascinating and just like crystallized for me in a way that I have also like been thinking a lot about, because it was a weird sort of cognitive dissonance that I was like, I have been obsessing about the way I look all year, but I'm not going anywhere. I'm not presenting myself to anyone. I'm not doing events. And I think it really was because I was like sitting with myself and my self-image entirely alone for maybe the first time in my life. Wow, we just went on a wildly different conversational track.
No, that's incredible. I think that this pandemic has affected all of us in so many ways that we maybe fully don't realize yet even. And it's just going to keep coming in waves. And I kind of love it because it's encouraged all of us, I think, to dig a little deeper. But yeah, anyway, it is a wildly different tangent. Hey, I'm just looking at the time. Should we do some audience?
I also just did that too.
I just realized.
Questions. Oh, okay. So the first question I'm going to take, because it's very clearly for me, which is, where can I get your Infinity Gauntlet bracelet, which is this thing I'm wearing.
Gorgeous.
It's from Hot Topic a while ago. It's definitely cheap and is definitely like giving me some kind of rash as I'm wearing it, but it's really cool, so I don't really care. But yeah, it's Hot Topic, but I also think I got it after I bought it a while ago. So here's the other thing. Okay, sorry. My problem with Marvel is that I love stuff, and I love owning stuff. And so like with Gentleman's Guide, there's like 3 pieces of merchandise that exist that are fan made, and I own them all because I just love stuff. And so with Marvel, it's like, not only is there so much stuff to own, but also I have an excuse to buy. I can't write it off, but still I'm like, I try. And so I just like want to own all this stuff, but I'm working on books and characters that I can't talk about yet. So I have an excessive amount of merchandise for the next character I'm writing about. that I have to be very careful, like not, I think I've slipped up a couple of times and like put stuff on Instagram and just been like, wow, I hope nobody's, hopefully I have enough Marvel paraphernalia that nobody's reading too far into this. Anyways, all of that was to be said that when I found out I was doing Gamora and Nebula, I wanted this Infinity Gauntlet thing that had been previously sold at Hot Topic and was no longer sold at Hot Topic. So I think I got it secondhand somewhere. So if you dig around, you'll probably be able to find it somewhere.
Maybe eBay.
So our next question. Yeah, or I do like Poshmark a lot.
Oh yeah.
Or what was the other place? It's like there's somewhere else that has like Depop has a lot of the like kind of offbeat stuff that's not quite so like mainstream brands. They're a little more like alternative. Cool. Okay, since I talked about my jewelry, Sandhya, do you have a library at home?
Oh,
that question.
Do I have a library at home? So yes. Like
because mine is obviously on display.
I see. I was like, is it like a bookshelf?
They want to know about, the people want to know about your library.
Gotcha. Yes, I do actually have two. So I have one downstairs in my office right over here that is filled with my books, like my foreign editions and special editions and stuff like that. And then upstairs, I have a library of like my favorite books and then books from friends. And then I have like another shelf of like signed copies from events and friends and famous authors I got to meet and stuff like, so like a brag shelf. So yes, I have a library and it is very organized.
What's the biggest brag on your brag shelf? What's your most prized treasure?
Let me think. I have a Becky Albertalli Love Simon, which I am very, very excited about. I love that. And I never loan it out. I actually had a Steph Garber first edition of Caraval that I got when she first, like from one of her first events. And I loaned it out to a neighbor kid and she never brought it back. So I'm very, very annoyed at that. But I learned my lesson there. So probably those two things.
I would be banging down that neighbor kid's door every single day, being like, hey, my book.
Where is it? I actually have Gentleman's Guide on that shelf as well. Like one of your first events. Yeah, so exciting.
Do you have a favorite of your foreign editions?
I do. I'm trying to see. I think it's the Turkish one. I can't get up and look, but it's like the Windipal Merishi Turkish one. It's all white and it's just got a really pretty henna pattern on the front. They did a different cover. Most of them kept the covers, but yeah, I really love that one.
Next question. What is your biggest inspiration for creating well-rounded, diverse characters?
Ooh. Why don't you go first with that one?
Oh, no.
I did put you on the spot.
Biggest inspiration is just like thinking of people as people and not as itemized checklists of diversity and not feeling like you have to meet some kind of quota. I know there's like it feels like there's a lot of pressure lately that every character you write has to have a laundry list of marginalizations and you have to go through them each and have a paragraph devoted to each of them, which I think is very counterproductive to real diversity, because real diversity is so like any sort of marginalizations I have are both intrinsic to who I am and they affect everything I do and every interaction I have, while at the same time they don't impact my everyday life at all. And that's kind of a hard, it's a hard balance to say like being a queer woman is something that I deal with every day and also something that I never think about. And so I think when you have characters that are authentically and realistically diverse, you don't think about them as being diverse characters, you just think about them as being characters. Yeah, I don't know. The inspiration is just like thinking about people as people. And also, I don't know, I have it easy with Marvel too, because I have like a great foundation laid by lots of other creators and actors and directors and people who've worked on these characters for a long time. Like with Gamora and Nebula, there was so much emotional groundwork already laid there, that it was really lucky to just kind of get to go back and fill in some of the holes. What would you say?
I think you just do it so well, even with like your Gentleman's Guide series. But I think the same as you. Like I did an event with Casey McQuiston recently, and she was talking about how representation is just part of craft, which I really loved. Like people think it's like this add-on thing that you tack on to your story, when really it should be like part of anything, just like, you know, your character's internal goals and external goals and motivations and conflicts and everything else, setting, all of that, the representation is part of that. So like it has to be approached with that level of focus and, you know, research and whatever else you need to do. And just like you said, like think of people as well-rounded people as opposed to like a checklist, you know. And I really I'm a huge fan of character sheets. So I have some that I use. I think I got it from the Michigan RWA website, but I really love them because it helps me dive really deep into each character before I even start writing. And I think it's very important, no matter what you're writing, that the character comes first, fully fleshed out. And you have like a sense of like a three-dimensional character as opposed to just like this cardboard cutout that you're trying to place into the plot.
Perfect. And then our last one is, when can I tell you anything about the third Marvel book? I don't know. Someday I'll get an email that's like, we're announcing it right now. Or more likely, the emails I usually get are, we announced it 20 minutes ago. Surprise.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, I have no idea. Watch my Instagram and maybe I'll be like Taylor Swift and drop all these little like Easter egg clues that people can go back over. And
that would be amazing.
Oh, we have another question. Do you interview folks of identities that are different from your own, or does most of your research come through books, web, etc.? So I'm assuming this is mostly about diversity and representation. Thoughts? How do you approach that?
I don't interview people. I think that a lot of stuff could go wrong with that. I think that if you're writing someone who is a meaty enough character in your book of a marginalized representation that is different from yours, then probably you should know people like organically already of that background. You should probably not, like, I'm saying this as a person who has gotten countless emails from writers who are like, hey, I want to write an Indian American character. Can you help me? Give me some tips. And I hate that question because firstly, if I don't know you, like, don't just approach me about that. It feels really weird and like crossing a boundary.
I was going to say the subtext of that question is give me permission.
Yes.
Or like, give me your stamp. Tell me it's okay that I do this. And then someday if I get called out on something, I can be like, well, Sandhya said it was okay.
It was her. So. Yes, exactly. And this just feels really icky to me. So I tend to write people, if I already, have friendships with people of certain marginalizations, I'll put them in, and then I will ask my publisher to pay for a diversity reader. So someone from that marginalization who gets paid to read the book and give honest feedback about any problematic areas that are in the book that, you should definitely fix. And then of course I do my own research as well. I do read books, whatever other I can get my hands on. But I would just say, just be really careful about just approaching people and saying like, hey, give me tips on writing your marginalization, because it can come off really not in the way that you probably mean it to.
Yeah, it can come off kind of tokenizing. And I think also when you're interviewing people like about their identity, you can't, it can be helpful, but you also can't say like, okay, so I'm writing, like, you can't like give people a situation in the book and be like, how would you react to that as an Indian American woman? Because you're an Indian American woman, but you're also, you're all these other things too that are going to affect how you react. And also it's not a real thing, not a real situation. Like, I'm a big advocate though of talking to people not with an agenda. And that's just sort of like something in general is whenever you're being being creative, like engage with the world around you, including like engage with the people around you and where they come from and what their background is and things like that. And thinking specifically of, for me, the most like research and work I've put into, that sounds weird. Let's say this, the most like cognizant I've ever been of writing representation in books is writing about Percy in The Gentleman's Guide, who has epilepsy. And I struggled for so long with that because there is like a little bit of it factors into the plot in ways that I was trying to subvert tropes, but I was really worried I was going to play into them, like tropes about chronic illness. I didn't have firsthand experience with epilepsy, but I got interested is the wrong word. I started becoming curious about it because at one point in my life, I thought I maybe had a type of epilepsy where I was like having these like blackout periods, and so I started reading about it a ton, and then I started reading about sort of the wider, you start on one thing and then it always expands and it expands. And then too, I was also like balancing the history element of it and like, how do you write about something that we had totally no understanding of in the 18th century? And so everything that I like, how do you portray something sensitively while also portraying it accurately? And I was even trying to I was like, how do I talk about first aid in a historical context when also like probably anything they would have done historically is terrible. And I don't want to tell people to do that. And especially when you don't have that much representation. So I ended up doing like a ton of research in terms of reading about like epilepsy as a disease, reading about the different types of it. I also found there is a German epilepsy museum, which talks about the history of epilepsy.
Wow.
And they were awesome. All of their emails, I think they just like wrote in German and then put through Google Translate. So it took a little bit of creative maneuvering to understand some of them. But also I love historians because for every weird thing in history that you want to talk about, somebody has like done a PhD in it and is just dying to talk to you about it. So I would get these like long, extensive, wonderful emails back from them about specifically history. And then also like I did end up talking to people with epilepsy, but I didn't talk to them in the sense of like, so I also have a character with epilepsy. Tell me how you would feel about this. Tell me how you would feel about this representation. And so I think it's about being curious and thoughtful and empathetic and not treating people as pillars of their, or not pillars, what's the word?
Monoliths.
A single monolith. Thank you. I was like another large structure. Not treating people as monoliths, not reducing people to a single element of their identity, and then also not using people from marginalized backgrounds as shields or as like trump cards that you can say like, well, she told me it was okay, or I had this sensitivity reader read it and they said it was fine. So yeah. I hope that kind of answered the question.
I want to apologize. I wasn't here earlier. My Zoom was not working at all. I'm really glad you guys came in to talk and handled the questions. I want to ask Mackenzi, do you consider your books young adult? Because that's why I hadn't seen it. It was shelved in the YA section. I realized not in the superhero and manga and sort of media characters where I used to leave them.
I mean, they're YA only in that they're published as YA and they're marketed as YA books, but they're very much like prequel. And because they're prequels to, I'm someone at Marvel will get mad at me if I say they're prequels to the movies, but this one in particular like takes place in a point in time before the films, and it's meant to serve as kind of a prequel to the films. So it's really a book for anybody who enjoys the Guardians of the Galaxy films and enjoys Marvel stuff. They're books for Marvel fans. They just happen to get published by a young adult imprint.
Marvel spent 60 years rewriting the history so much, I doubt they can keep it straight anymore. Even I've been a fan since I was a kid, and I cannot sometimes tell you which incarnation of this character are we currently looking at.
Well, that's the other thing. And if I can, I'm sorry, we're going over time here. But it's interesting that like the press side of Marvel and the studio side are totally separate. And the press side is very reluctant to acknowledge the studio exists, even though the studio is like the reason. They kind of won't acknowledge the fact that like what most people are bringing to these books and why they're excited about them is because of the films and the TV shows. So I think there's a little bit of like OG pride there, that it's like, we were doing this first, we've been in the comics press for forever. I think there's also like not legalities, but there's some sort of like they don't want to crossbreed these two, but I don't know, it's a very weird separation of church and state. and with Gamora and with Loki, it was especially that way because they were actively working on the TV show. And as I was writing the book, they knew they had plans for this TV show. And this character has such a cult following because of the film specifically. And with Nebula and Gamora, not only do they not have that cult following, but they also, like, the version of them people know from the version of them people know is from the films. And that version of them does not exist in the comics until the films come out. So if you read back far enough, the versions of Nebula and Gamora in like the weirdo 70s space age Marvel stuff doesn't look anything like them. So I forced them to acknowledge the fact that the movies exist, because it's like if you write to these versions of the characters that only exist in the comics, nobody's going to know who you're talking about. So it's an interesting.
My friend,
yeah, I know.
Fox,
sorry, that would be a
DC
whole other.
And could tell me all kinds of horror stories. I'm currently reading your book, The Princes and Promises. I'm enjoying it. It's not the sort of one I would usually pick up, but I'm having lots of fun.
Thank you.
We're going to have to wrap it up, I'm afraid. But if you guys come out, I was going to say you can wear your glittery gown or your suits or whatever, and we'll be happy to host an event. You probably can wear your pajamas. We get away with that too. Thank you to all the folks for attending. This will be up on our webpage in a few days, and feel free to go and order the books and support the authors who spent their time entertaining us tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks everyone who came.